On behalf of my 9 brothers and sisters and extended family, I want to say some words about my great dad. He was an amazing person. He led a life of great accomplishment. He was an All-American college athlete, naval officer, college coach, athletic director, practicing attorney, state senator, district court judge, special superior court judge. He was many things. He was a dutiful son, a loving brother, a talented handyman, a patient gardener, a scene-stealing performer, and a world-class charmer, and always the life of the party. But the role he was most proud of was that of being George, of Pat and George, the amazing parent team that raised 10 children. George loved my mother, who was herself a remarkable, loving, encouraging, nurturing wife and mother, and a true force of nature. Together they engendered the love and respect of their children that endured throughout their lifetimes until today, through today. Pat and George even had a grandson named Pat and George. Christmas morning in our home was a glorious experience to which even Norwood and Rockwell could not do justice. My parents let us in camping, playing, studying, growing up together, with the 5 oldest boys living in our converted attic, and meals served from restaurant-sized pots and pans on a gigantic homemade table my father built. We ate dinner together every night, and my father made sure the kids cleaned up afterwards too. My dad once installed a 10-gallon cafeteria milk dispenser in the kitchen in an experiment that went way wrong. When the kids finished up all the milk and ants with chocolate syrup in 2 days. The Sullivan children are still as close as ever after all the years. My parents had their hands full. At age 32, when my father was practicing law 2 years before he was elected to the state senate, my mother and father had 8 children, the oldest of whom was 8 years, 7 months old. The following 2 children, Eddie and David, came a little later. And from what the rest of us understand, they lived a quiet and posh life of travel and restaurants. Notwithstanding my father's busy career, he was devoted to his children individually as well as collectively. He coached each one in a special activity. And our house showed it. Dave wanted to be a football kicker. So my dad put up a field goal kicking net in the living room. And they traveled the country going to kicking camps. But Peggy, there was tennis. She was a great tennis player in high school. There was a net in the attic for serving. He installed a basketball hoop at the top of the cellar stairs at a regulation distance from the landing below for practicing the free throws. You have that in your house? Danny wanted to learn about automobile engines, and for 6 months, 1 year, there was literally an automobile engine on a table in our family room. My mother was a tolerant woman. Kathy was a musician, and my dad taught himself the instruments so he could help teach Kathy in the music room. David, Brian, Dan, Mike, Greg, Ken, and Tim all became accomplished in the shot put and discus, some more than others. And my dad, former All-American shot put, started as our coach. Jerry became a state champion football player and captain of his college team. And later, George coached his grandchildren, the hammer throw, which he had to learn himself to teach them. My son Danny won a medal at the U.S. Junior Olympics as a result. He paid attention to the family. But my father was a humble person. The funeral home displayed his judicial robe, but beside it, they should be displayed as ever-present, rear-worn, stained blue denim coat that we were all familiar with, and with a few gardening tools tucked in the pocket. He was modest to the point of being embarrassed at praise when the state legislature voted to name the bridge that we just crossed over in Norwood in his honor. He asked whether it was too late to stop it. But the dedication of the bridge, he said, he responded with good spirit and humor. At the dedication, he said, "I'm giving serious thought to making this a total bridge." And he concluded his remarks by saying, "Get off of my bridge." My father was a man of integrity, generosity, and compassion. When he lost a lawsuit against a roofing company, my dad fixed the roof of the client's house himself. It's a true story. My parents' best example of generosity is involving a Christian family movement in Norwood, which had dozens of couples who contributed their time to help unfortunate families in trouble who needed help in our community. These couples became my parents' friends and the Sullivan family's extended family for life. And at yesterday's wake, we were warmly reunited with many of them and their children for a week. It was wonderful. My father was a principled and courageous person. He told his children, "Don't be afraid of doing something unpopular if it's right." An example of this occurred during his first term in the state Senate. He faced a politically tough vote when he voted to repeal the Massachusetts blue laws that made it illegal at that time illegal for retail stores to open on Sunday, the Christian day of Sabbath. My father believed that the law was unfair to non-Christians, especially those for whom Sunday was not the day of Sabbath, and that working consumers would benefit by expanded opportunities to shop. He was the only Catholic senator to vote for the repeal, and he realized that the vote could cost him his political career. 6 days before the election, legendary Boston Herald columnist George Fraser wrote these words, which I love, about my father and that vote. Senator George Sullivan is a man who votes according to the dictates of his conscience and who does not defer to party politics. It is as ennobling as it is enthralling to realize that such a legislator exists. If I were a resident of this district, I would stand up and take my hat off in honor of the irreproachable representation presented to me by this courageous man. 6 days later, he narrowly won re-election. Another example of my father's courage and principles occurred after then Governor Ennett Peabody had nominated him to become a judge in 1964. While his name was pending confirmation by the Governor's Council, my father voted to abolish the Governor's Council. The Council responded by refusing to take up his nomination at 12 consecutive meetings in a much publicized news story name of the time until they finally could approve it. Another example of my father's courage occurred when he was a judge and he attended a protest rally against the Vietnam War and later spoke out very strongly. In defense of my father's actions, the former editor of the Catholic newspaper, The Pilot, wrote these words, which I also love about my father. Judge Sullivan took a stand, made valorous commitment, and risked much because he so generously and profoundly deplores the bloody war in Vietnam. His honor, George Sullivan, shines with a splendor almost as rare as Sir Galahad at King Arthur's Round Table. Now, as a side note, I think my father set the bar way too high for his children. Sir Galahad was a sinless knight who actually recovered the Holy Grail. How are we supposed to live up? This is. When my mom died in 1997, my dad told my sister Peggy, I just lost half of myself, and it was the better half. I don't know how to go on. But my dad rebounded, and he endured with the help of friends and family. He became actively involved in Norwood Senior Citizen Center. His kids had dinner with him at his house every Monday night, more than 500 times. And we never missed a New England Patriots game at his house, including 4 Super Bowl victories. Dad lived with our sister Kathy and later our sister Peggy and her great husband Ken Jamilli in Hawaii over the winter months for many years. Peggy and Ken also stayed with my dad at his house in Norwood for months at a time with their 2 kids who my dad adored. Our brother Brian visited my father all the time and took him to hundreds and hundreds of appointments. But the all-star of the Sullivan family and supporting Dad was our brother Danny. We lived with him at 41 Howard Street for the past 6 years after he developed Alzheimer's disease. Danny was taking care of Dad, but Dad never thought of it that way. To Dad, they were best friend roommates. And good brothers and sisters are eternally grateful for the care, love, and life-altering generosity that you provided, Dad. Dad's Alzheimer's progressed. His children took turns staying with him one night, visiting and sleeping in bed nearby hills. One thing we all noticed was that Dad never lost a charm. He would greet everyone with bright eyes and enthusiastic smile. He was always joyful, friendly, kind, and appreciative. I guess those traits were so ingrained in his very core, they never went away. Never went away. When he died on Friday, he was surrounded by all 10 of his children. While we were singing our trademark song, we ain't got a barrel of money. We might be ragged and funny, but we travel along singing our song side by side. My father had a tradition in our family of expressing thanks for our mom when she did something great for us. He would say, "Let's hear it for Mom." And then we would all shout, "Hip hip hooray, hip hip hooray, hip hip hooray." We did that hundreds of times. So, in conclusion, I would ask you to join the 10 Sullivan children and our extended families to give the same cheer to our amazing, honorable, humble, courageous George A. Sullivan. Let's hear it.